What kind of dog chooses to sit beside the saddest child in the room and never leave? Chicago, late November. The kind of gray that settles into your bones and stays there. The elevators ding softly. Somewhere down the hall, a heart monitor beeps a slow, tired rhythm. And in the corner of the pediatric oncology ward, a small dog waits, still as a statue. His fur is scruffy, uneven. A patch above his eye never quite grew back. But there's something about him, something gentle, as if he understands too much for a dog his size. His name is Benny. They say he was found after the floods, mud-caked, ribs showing, standing alone in an abandoned shelter as the water crept higher. No one came. Not even when the waters pulled back. He was just there, waiting. Now, months later, Benny wears a blue therapy vest. He doesn't bark, doesn't jump, just walks beside the volunteer who brings him in every morning. His leash barely pulls. He knows where to go. He stops outside room 16. Waits. Inside, Nurse Claire is wrapping a child's IV with soft gauze. Her hands are careful. Her eyes are tired. Claire is the kind of nurse who always shows up, even when she doesn't sleep, even when her heart feels like broken glass pressed behind her ribs. 2 months ago, she lost something she never held long enough to name, a pregnancy that ended before it began. She never told anyone here, just came back to work, let the shifts stretch longer, let the silence at home keep filling the rooms. She didn't ask for a therapy dog to join the ward. She didn't see the point. But Benny didn't care about that. He just waited. The first time he brushed past her leg, she flinched. Not because she was afraid, because it had been a long time since anything warm touched her without needing something in return. Now, every day, he walks these same halls. Kids with hair barely clinging to their heads reach for him with IVs taped to their arms. Some cry, some smile, some just watch. And then there's Lucas, room 18, 6 years old, pale as paper. He hasn't smiled in weeks, barely speaks. His mother sits beside him, day and night, her voice low and constant. Reading books aloud, he no longer follows. Telling stories he doesn't respond to. When Benny first approached him, Lucas didn't even look. But Benny didn't move. He sat beside the bed and waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Claire passed by with meds, glanced in, kept walking. Another hour. Benny didn't leave. Eventually, Lucas turned his head. His fingers twitched. And then, something changed. The next morning, Benny went straight to that room. Claire opened her mouth to protest. Dogs weren't supposed to be off-leash like that, but stopped. Lucas was laughing. A thin, breathy laugh that sounded like it had traveled 1,000 miles to get out. Claire stood frozen in the doorway. And Benny just rested his chin on the child's leg. Day after day, the bond deepened. Lucas fed him crackers from trembling fingers. Benny would climb gently onto the foot of the bed. Never too close, just enough to be felt. Claire began staying longer after her shifts. Not charting, not checking vitals. Just sitting, watching. Sometimes she'd reach down and scratch behind Benny's ears. His fur was coarse, warm. One night, she whispered, "Thank you," into the dark. She didn't know who she was saying it to. Another week passed. Claire started smiling again, faintly, and Lucas was stronger. He joked once about Benny needing a haircut. Even his mom laughed. For a moment, The entire ward felt lighter, like hope had cracked the ceiling. But it never lasts forever, does it? One morning, 7:15. Claire was sipping burnt coffee by the nurse's station. The lights flickered once, then a voice on the intercom, code blue, room 18. Claire dropped her cup. She ran. Shoes slapping the linoleum, inside the room, chaos. Nurses, a doctor, the crash cart, and Benny, still there, pressed into the corner, his eyes wide. Not moving. Lucas didn't make it. By 8:32, the hallway was silent again. The stretcher rolled out. A mother's sobs echoed against the walls. Benny didn't follow. He walked back into the empty room, crawled under the bed, and didn't come out. Claire found him there hours later. She sat down beside the bed. Didn't speak. Didn't cry. Just placed her hand gently on Benny's back and waited. Just like he had. Just like he always did. The sun never broke through the clouds that week. Not once. The windows in the pediatric wing stayed fogged, like they were holding in grief the way lungs hold in air before a scream. Lucas's room was cleared the next morning. No balloons, no drawings taped to the walls, no tiny socks balled in the corner, just silence. And Benny. He kept returning to the empty room. No leash, no prompting. He'd walk in slowly, nose low, and lie beneath the bed frame. Every day, the nurses let him. Even the ones who didn't believe in therapy dogs. Claire sat there sometimes too, not to do anything, just to be there. She used to rush through her rounds, focused, distant, mechanical, but now she found herself slowing, listening, holding tiny hands longer than she needed to, sitting beside kids as they cried through needle, pricks, or the quiet terror of another scan. And Benny was there through it all. With Jamie, the girl who wouldn't speak after her surgery. He just stood near her wheelchair, tail still, eyes soft. With Elijah, who vomited after every treatment. Benny didn't flinch, just rested beside the bed, even when the air smelled of iron and sadness. They all began to wait for him, little fingers tapping impatiently at the window when his vest came into view each morning. A boy named Darnell made a drawing of Benny with a cape. Benny the Brave, it said. It made Claire smile, for real this time, the kind that feels like it might stick. One afternoon, near the end of her shift, Claire found herself back in Lucas's room. She wasn't sure why. The bed was bare, sheets folded tight, but Benny was there, curled into a ball. Beneath the frame, she slid down to the floor beside him, pressed her back to the wall. "You miss him too, huh?" Benny didn't move, just sighed softly. Claire reached for her necklace, fingers trembling. It was a tiny silver circle. Inside it, a name engraved so small you had to squint. Emma. That was going to be her name. Claire had never told anyone. Not even her sister. But sitting beside a rescue dog beneath the bed of a lost child, it didn't feel like a secret anymore. She whispered it aloud. Emma. Benny looked up, ears twitching, then rested his head on her knee. And for the first time in a long, aching stretch of days, Claire cried, not fast, not loud, just slow, steady tears that had been waiting. She buried her face in Benny's fur and let it come. No one interrupted. Later that night, she didn't go straight home. She sat in the staff break room, lights low, fingers tracing the cracks in the table. Then, without really planning to, she opened her laptop, typed in pet therapy certification, just to look. That weekend, Claire bought Benny a new vest, not because he needed it. The old one still fit, but this one was soft blue, with a patch sewn into the edge. It said, "You are needed here." She gave it to the volunteer handler on Monday. He clipped it on, smiled, said, "Looks good on him." Claire nodded. "It does." Later that day, a girl named Imani had a rough treatment, threw up twice, refused to open her eyes. Claire sat on the floor beside her wheelchair, one hand gently on her knee. Benny nudged the other side, slowly climbed into her lap. Imani didn't move. Then her hand twitched, and she whispered, "Good boy." Claire exhaled, like the whole room had been holding its breath, and she was the first to let go. That night, as she walked to her car, snow began to fall. Soft, early flakes that didn't stick. She looked up for the first time in months. She didn't dread going home. She still carried the ache. That wouldn't leave. But now it wasn't the only thing she carried. There was something else, something small and warm, like a heartbeat returning, like a dog waiting beside a bed that no longer needed him, and still choosing to stay. Snow fell every day that week, not heavy, just steady. Like the sky remembered how to be gentle. Inside the hospital, the halls stayed cold, but the children's wing began to feel different, not happier, but less hollow. One of the nurses started bringing in stickers, another brought in her guitar, and Benny was just always there, sitting quietly beside IV poles, waiting patiently during blood draws. There was something in the way he moved, or didn't. He never demanded. He never barked. He just showed up. That was enough. One morning, Claire noticed a small change. A boy named Matteo, who always refused. His meds reached for them without a fight. Because Benny had come early, Matteo patted his back, whispered something into his fur, and took the cup. Claire watched from the doorway. Later that afternoon, she stopped by the volunteer office. She asked if Benny could stay longer. Just one more round. The handler smiled. He stays as long as he's needed. That evening, Claire found herself standing outside Lucas's old room again. It was still empty, but the door was open. She stepped inside. The cleaning staff had finally taken away the last box. The window was clean. The floor swept. Benny didn't crawl under the bed this time. He sat in the middle of the room, looking at the door. Claire sat down beside him. "It's okay," she whispered. "We can go." They left the room together. That night, Claire didn't fall asleep to the hum of the TV or the cold silence of a half-empty house. She lay in bed and thought about starting again. Maybe a class, maybe a visit to her sister, maybe getting certified herself. She didn't know yet. But the door that had been locked in her chest for months, it felt a little open now. The next week was hard. 2 kids got transferred to hospice. Another relapsed. The air in the wing turned heavier again. Claire walked into the break room and saw one of the younger nurses crying over her sandwich. She didn't say anything, just sat next to her. A moment later, Benny padded in. He rested his chin on the nurse's lap. She didn't speak, just kept crying, but her hand found his ear, and she didn't let go. On Friday, Claire brought in a book. It was a picture book. Soft watercolor pages and simple lines. She read it to a small group of kids who had enough strength to sit up that morning. Benny lay at her feet. Imani leaned against him. Matteo played with his tail. Claire didn't cry, but she felt her throat tighten more than once. After the story ended, one of the kids asked if Benny could have a story too. Claire smiled. Maybe next time. By the end of the month, the staff had made a small space near the front desk. A bed, a bowl, a sign that read, "Therapy, dog on duty." Sometimes, Claire would catch families staring at him. Exhausted moms, dads holding back tears, grandmas clutching purses like lifelines. They'd pause for just a moment, and Benny would look up. That's all. And, somehow, it helped. Claire overheard someone say it one day. That dog brings smiles where there should be tears. She didn't correct them, because they were right. But it was more than that. He didn't erase pain. He didn't chase away grief. He just made space for something else to exist beside it. Hope, stillness, presence. And that, Claire had learned, was sometimes more powerful than fixing anything. It was a Friday evening when it happened. The handler came in, eyes tired. He knelt beside Benny. "You're tired, huh, buddy?" Benny didn't move, just breathed slow. The handler looked up at Claire. "He's getting older." Claire nodded. "Yeah, maybe a few more visits. Then he retires." Claire looked down at Benny. Her chest tightened. Not from grief, but from something else. A realization. She knelt beside him, ran her hand over his back. He leaned into her touch. "You've done more than enough." He looked up at her, and she knew. He had chosen her too. 2 weeks later, Benny made his last official visit. No balloons, no announcements, just another cold Chicago morning. Gray sky, damp air. But something felt different. Almost every room had someone waiting. Some of the children didn't know he wouldn't be back. Some did. Mateo had drawn him a picture. Imani had braided a tiny ribbon into his collar. Claire brought in a special treat, peanut butter folded into soft bread. Benny wagged his tail once when he saw her. He didn't run, didn't jump, but he walked straight to her side. The day passed in quiet motion, one room to the next. Claire followed more than she led, watching Benny do what he always did best: show up. He didn't perform tricks, didn't chase toys. He just laid his head on laps. Let his fur be cried into. Let his silence say what words never could. When they reached the last room, Benny paused at the door. It was Lucas's old room. Now repainted, new curtains. A different child lived there. A girl. About 8. Hair mostly gone. Fingers wrapped in gauze. She was awake. Barely. Claire opened the door slowly. The girl looked up. Her mother turned, eyes wide. Benny stepped in. He moved slowly, as if every bone remembered the weight of this space. Then, without a sound, he climbed into the bed. The girl didn't flinch. She lifted her tiny hand, rested it on his back, and closed her eyes. Claire stood in the doorway. No words, just breath. The mother mouthed, "Thank you." Claire nodded. They stayed like that for a while. When it was time to go, Benny didn't need a command. He stood, walked back, to the door, and paused once. Just once, then left. Outside, snow had started falling again. Claire stood under the awning, watching flakes land on Benny's back. He didn't shake them off. She reached down, brushed a few from his ears. "I was wrong. About you, you know." He blinked slowly. Claire smiled. Not everything is supposed to be fixed. Some things just need to be seen. That night, Benny went home with the handler. He curled up on his bed, slept through the night without stirring. In the morning, he walked a little slower, but he still followed the handler to the kitchen, still waited for breakfast, still wagged his tail. Claire visited a few days later. She brought a small box. Inside was a new blue vest, not for Benny, but for the next dog, whenever that might be. She sat with him on the porch, talked softly about nothing, and let the silence fill in the rest. 2 weeks passed, then 4. The hospital was quieter without him. But something remained. A softness in the way the nurses spoke. A kindness that lingered longer in the halls. Claire kept working long shifts. But now, sometimes, she stayed late for different reasons. Reading to the kids, holding a hand, sometimes just sitting in the hallway. Not to fix, just to be. One day, she brought in a photo. It was framed. Simple. Benny, sitting under the nurse's desk, eyes steady, tail slightly curled. She placed it near the sign that still read, "Therapy, Dog on Duty." The new dog hadn't arrived yet, but no one moved the sign, because Benny still mattered. He always would. A few months later, Claire stood in that same hallway. Another gray day. The elevator chimed, the doors opened, and a new dog stepped out, younger, bigger, nervous. Claire knelt, offered her hand. The dog sniffed, then licked her wrist. The handler smiled. He's not Benny, but he's got heart. Claire looked into the dog's eyes. No, she said, but maybe he'll bring his own kind of light. And deep inside her chest, where grief once sat like stone, something warm stirred. Benny was gone, but the space he made, it stayed. And in that space, life could begin again, even in the place where smiles should never have been. Because sometimes love doesn't heal, it simply holds you until you're ready to stand. And that was enough. Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.